Greetings, Kerbonauts! This is Kerbal Space Program. I'm Bob Fitch, and this is the first episode of a new mini-series documenting the construction of the International YouTube Space Station. I won't be doing all of the episodes, I'm only doing this one. This is the core module that is going to start the space station, and then I'll be passing this file off to somebody else. I'm not even sure yet who. And they will be attaching the second module, and then they'll pass it on to the third person who will attach the third module, and so on and so on. Now this shuttle you're watching, which I had a false start on because I had tried to launch it where the power was only halfway up. Have you ever done that, where you go to the launch pad and you try to hit the spacebar and you forget to throttle to full and it defaults to 50% and so it falls back down again? Well, that happened to me, so I restarted and hit it to full throttle this time. But this is not actually my shuttle. This was provided to me in the save game that's getting this whole thing started off. I don't even have to use it for my module. In fact, this isn't my module. When I got this save file, this shuttle was already in orbit and it has a little teeny module in it already, and that's what I'm supposed to go up and attach to start off with my section. And that's what this right here is. This module was already waiting for me when I put this saved game into my directory. The community manager for KSP had already launched it. And I guess I'm supposed to open up these cargo bays here and bring out the module and then dock something to it, and that becomes the first part of our new space station. He also told me that I can move this anywhere I want to create the first location for the space station. And upcoming a little bit in the video, you're gonna see what I selected. But I still wanted to see what it might have been like had I been the one that had launched this in the first place, so I decided to take the craft that he built and bring it out for a little bit of spin around the universe. And I have to say, it flies pretty nice. Well, we're coming up on the decoupling. Whoa, okay, well, I was saying we're coming up on the decoupling point for those boosters, but I'd have to say there's no chance you missed that. That was pretty dramatic. We're riding a little hot right now in the atmosphere, but those are just aerodynamic effects, or at the very least, if we're heating up in the front, it doesn't seem to be causing any damage that's noticeable. Things like nose cones and shuttle parts can withstand higher temperatures, so that's probably what's going on. And then at that point, everything was going great, so I turned off the video recording, thinking that this flight was just about done. I was going to just stop right there and revert back and go do my actual flight, when suddenly, things went terribly wrong. We collided with the fuel tank upon decoupling, and so I turned the recording back on again, but it was already too late. We were just crumbling into little pieces and falling through the air. Fortunately, it was Jebediah, so despite the fall, he survived the impact with the water, even without a parachute. Everybody else in the crew, they had parachutes. They bailed out and they parachuted down to safety. But even Jeb, he was fine too. So now, knowing that I have to take this shuttle somewhere that I can start the space station with the module that I've been provided, I have to figure out where to go, and I happened to notice that there were two objects that were in the tracking station. One of them was an asteroid, as well as the other being the shuttle. So I thought that this was some sort of subtle hint from the community manager that I was supposed to go and incorporate this shuttle bit into the asteroid to make my space station. As it turns out, he says nope, total coincidence. He's not even sure why there was an active asteroid like that. But it's too late now. I've made the decision. We are going to make our station incorporated into the side of a giant asteroid. It is a Class E, folks. It's a big one. So as you saw a moment ago, I set up a maneuver node that would start the shuttle using whatever fuel there was left, heading over to try to intercept that giant asteroid, which is on a course taking it very near Kerbin, but not anywhere that I can easily get to and intercept. We're going to dock to it way out there as it passes by. One thing this means is I needed to go into a retrograde orbit. The shuttle had originally been launched in its normal prograde direction, but that asteroid is coming in sort of retrograde. So not only am I changing the inclination, going practically polar to catch that thing, but we're also flipping the direction of our orbit around. I'm going to speed up the rest of this here. I simply drained all the rest of the fuel, so we'll just let that go by really fast here, going until We get whatever orbit we happen to have once that fuel runs out. We'll take care of the rest of it with our core module, and that's what this is. This is how I want it to look once it's in orbit. But first we need to launch it. Oh yeah! Nice. Okay, well that was our first attempt to launch it, and as you can see, it needed 3 extra struts. Funny how that works, just adding 3 extra struts. We take it out here one more time, try to lift off for another test, and this time find out that the thing flies just great. Crazy! 3 struts, and it's better. Of course, if you follow space in the news, you'll know that 1 strut can sometimes make all the difference. Well, anyway, this is just a test still. You can tell because we're launching at night here. Well, it's almost night, it's dusk, the sun is going down. I just want to go high enough to see that there won't be any issues, and then we're going to wait until the space shuttle is coming over this launch site here. So if everything goes well, we'll see that coming overhead later. We'll launch straight toward it, release the module from inside the shuttle, and then dock it to our space station. After getting a little bit higher, I realized the only remaining issue was that the oxidizer and fuel were running at a different ratio. I think I had loaded it up with too much fuel, not enough oxidizer, so we're going to have to fix that. But otherwise, everything else was working great, so this test flight is over. I did a little bit of staging to make sure everything decoupled properly, and then just let it burn up on its way back in so that we can go back and get ready to launch the real thing. We're going to go in the morning, and like I said, we're going to go with the space shuttle when it's flying overhead so that we can rendezvous with it. The early part of our flight is much the same as the test, so in a moment here we'll just sort of skip through it a little bit. The only real difference being that it's morning, and now the fuel has been fixed up. It's going down at the same rate. Both the oxidizer and the liquid fuel keeping nice and steady. Once our solid fuel burns out, we decouple those in pairs. 2 go and then the other 2 go, trying to make sure that they don't do anything like collide with each other, although I don't think it's really likely in this case, given that they're so far apart from each other and they have some retros on them that will force them even further away from the body of the craft. Fairly quickly, we'll find that our liquid core is also drained and ready to send us up after decoupling onto our big 3.75 meter NASA engine, one of the better ISPs in the game, so I'm getting some pretty decent fuel efficiency on that. That's a good thing because our ascent is not using the nice gradual gravity turn that I might normally do, and that's because of all these parts on here. This is an unusual payload. It's not some normal rocket with a fairing that you can go up with a nice easy gravity turn. Instead, we're going a little bit higher and doing our best to balance out trying to do that turn, but at the same time avoiding the atmosphere. I did attach some nose cones on top of the docking ports, and I can undock those once we get higher altitude. When you attach something in the VAB onto a docking node, you can still tell it to undock, and that piece will come off, and so that's what I've done. The only difference is I can't redock it later because the nose cone is obviously not actually a docking port. But that's okay, I have no intention of redocking them. We're going to let them float away as debris, never to be seen again. Alrighty, back out in orbit. We're trying to rendezvous at the Buran, but this module is just really heavy. I put as much fuel as I could on there, but we're not going to make it in this attempt. I'll decouple some plates that were used to attach struts. Those were on the bottom docking nodes there, and those float away just like the nose cones did. After that, we have to go back down, and after constructing a special propulsion section, we will lift off once again, heading up this time to link up with our space station so that we can push it all the way up to the Buran. So this first attempt is going to be a simulation. This has never launched before, so we don't want it to be the real thing yet. We don't want to risk the life of our test pilot there, so he's in the simulator. You can see him in the bottom right. You know who that is. And it's a good thing that this is just a sim, because decoupling didn't go so well, but After making a few modifications, we are ready for the real launch. We're waiting for our station to come back underneath, or not underneath, but on top of the Space Center. And once there, we can lift off and try to make another rendezvous with it. As you can see, we have some special arms that stick out that are going to dock onto the bottom of our space station and help to propel us with those nuclear engines all the way up to the Buran. And then from there, all the way over to the asteroid. I've done the calculations by hand on how much fuel I think I'm going to need for this. I took the mass of the space station and then the wet and dry mass of this module that we're about to go up and dock on here, then figured out how much delta V that would mean this is going to have. So the next question is, how much am I going to need? We're going to have to take the orbit where the Buran is right now and shift it all the way out to intercept that orbit of the asteroid. After that, we're going to have to rendezvous with the asteroid by matching its speed. So the question is, how fast will it be going once we're going past Kerbin at it? Now hold that thought for just 1 second. As you can see right there, oh dear, I have made a mistake. I thought that I was supposed to be flying on one heading and I was flying on the wrong heading. So even though it's not a sim, I reverted anyway, just pretending that if something like that had really happened, we probably just would have gone all the way up and come back down again, eject, or whatever it's going to take them down on parachutes. Pretty much like what's happening right now, because we had yet another problem with our launch. I thought I had all those problems fixed, but since this is not a sim, we have to take this all the way to the ground and make sure that everybody survives okay. And by everybody, I really just mean Valentina. Valentina is going to be the one who takes the propulsion stage up to the station, docks it on, and then drives us out to our destination. Jebediah will be the test pilot for all of our launches, and she'll be in charge of that portion of the mission out at the asteroid. So we give it another try, and we have yet another problem with the decoupling, and I finally figured out what was going wrong with it. It was simply that at the moment of decoupling, I needed to make sure that I was in the center of my prograde. My angle of attack has to be perfect for that one moment, and I can then go back to whatever angle of attack I had before, and everything works okay that way. So it's not really a problem with the construction of the craft, it's pilot error. I need to fly better. Alright, so our propulsion stage is on a suborbital trajectory, but it is intercepting where the space station is going to be, so we'll just set up our maneuver now to be ready to match velocities at that location. As soon as we boost up the other side of our orbit, about half an orbit away from where we are now, we're going to be able to rendezvous with the station. So until then, we'll take care of a couple of house cleaning duties. We're going to pop off the little nose cones that I had on the decouplers, giving me a slightly better aerodynamics, and we'll put out the solar panels so that we can make it over there without running out of power. That would be terrible as well. I said decouplers, didn't I? I mean docking nodes. I keep doing that, saying decouplers when I mean docking nodes. Okay, we're coming into range to Deep Space YouTube, or whatever the heck this name is going to be when we're done with it. I don't know. Maybe somebody creative can come up with something. I'm an engineer. I don't name things. I give them acronyms, like in NASA. Everything NASA makes has to be 3 letters or something like that, it seems. You can't give stuff real names. Come on, that's silly. Well, we're getting very close now. I still have the giant engines down on the bottom of the propulsion stage. We won't be using those when we go over to the space station, but I wanted to eke out as much fuel from them as I could before I got rid of them. Rather than moving the propulsion stage to the side that had the docking nodes, I just went and flipped the station so that the docking nodes were facing me. But oh, we're coming in too fast. Oh, no. Oh dear. Stop. Oh, stop. Okay, we're good. Nothing broke. We banged a solar panel, but apparently the solar panel was made out of concrete and it did not break. So now we can shift ourselves over to the right location here, get our docking ports all lined up, obviously trying to get the 3 extended ones to dock up with those little extra hubs that come off of our deep space station here. and then the main big one right in the middle. They didn't all seem to connect right away, but my theory is that all of the wiggling I'm going to do, or maybe even just when I turn the engines on, it'll push those docking ports up into the right spot. Maybe then everything will lock down into the right location, and it'll be nice and strong and sturdy for our trip out to the asteroid. Well, we've just shifted one end of our orbit out to the station for our home and transfer maneuver here. Still with the big engines connected, there's a sliver of fuel left, and I'm going to keep on taking advantage of that. But ultimately, it is going to be too difficult probably to dock up with this module from the shuttle here. So that little itty bitty little teeny sliver that was left, I decouple and let those fly away. But now I am faced with an engineering difficulty. I had it all planned out in my head, but apparently what was in my head doesn't match with reality. The original thinking was that this extra arm that's coming off the top right now would go and dock up with the module from the shuttle. And then that would in turn be dragged back to the station and docked up underneath it. The problem is that right now we have the propulsion stage on there, and I don't know why, but I brain farted in some way and completely forgot about that. So we are going to have an engineering problem to solve right there. Another engineering problem we have is that the space shuttle was completely out of monopropellant, and so I was not able to back off from the module. But we can solve that problem by just using our little arm extender to bang into the shuttle until we dislodge that thing. On the other hand, that is going to lead to our next engineering problem. By knocking it loose, we have given it a little bit of a rotation. And I don't care what side I dock to on that thing. So I figure if I just get close to it, maybe eventually one of the two sides will line up at just the right moment as long as I can get in the right spot. But this goes on and on and on until I have to come up with a completely different plan for this. Plan B. We're going to open up the claw and ram the claw into it. Then we'll use the monopropellant and RCS of our arm to stop the rotation of that module. It still takes me a while to get myself lined up, and I bump it a couple of times and just make it go away rather than hooking into it with the claw. But ultimately, we finally get that thing jammed into just down on the edge of it, and then after releasing the claw, sure enough, the plan has worked. The module is no longer spinning in all these random directions, so we can finally dock to it on one of those two faces. At this point, though, we have drifted quite a long distance away from our space station, so we begin the long trip back. And then comes the question, where am I going to put this? I need it to be along the center of the vector that's going to go from the engines through the center of mass, which pretty much to me means that I need to stick it to the cupola. But I need to get it lined up straight into the cupola, and that takes a while in itself. There are no RCS jets on that module, and so it's a little unbalanced because all the RCS is only down on my arm, making it very hard to move around. Next problem, as if we didn't have enough of them, is it was a little bit off center, so I decide that perhaps spinning the module will initially align that straight. Now, if I keep spinning too much, it's going to go out of whack again. But just a little bit, got it lined up, and then I relocked that arm, and now it's pretty much down through the center of the vector of that craft's alignment. So that leads us to our next engineering problem, or really this is a logistics, planning, and execution problem. We need to figure out how to get to the asteroid. So I've waited for the asteroid to enter the SOI of Kerbin, just to make sure that I'll be lining myself up with the actual orbit that it's going to take through the system. And then we start fiddling with the node that's going to do the intercept with that orbit. Since I'd already used the fuel from the shuttle to get us flipped around going backward, and did most of our inclination change already, there's not a lot of inclination change left to do. It's pretty much just a pretty strong prograde with a slight inclination change to get us way out there, sliding the location of where we're going to do the burn just enough to make sure that we can get that ascending node lined up right around where our apoapsis is going to be, and the whole orbit lined up with the incoming asteroid, and then we're ready to make our burn. Now, even with 4 engines going, they are nuclear engines, they are low thrust and high ISP, so pretty efficient but pretty slow, and therefore this section is sped up quite a bit just to get through to the point where we can see it intercepting over there on the other side, intercepting that incoming asteroid orbit. You'll notice that once I hit the orbit with my apoapsis, I had to keep it going just a little bit more because there was no way to predict exactly when and where the asteroid was going to come in and how long it was going to take it to get to our location without doing tons of math that I didn't think I would need to do. If I just waited and let it show up, I could simply create a maneuver node to see where it was going to be, and then I didn't need to do any math. But it does mean that we need to go higher than the orbit, and in that moment where we've slowed down so much relative to Kerbin, the asteroid will then have an opportunity to catch up to us while we're sort of hovering there. It'll catch up, and then we can make the intercept as we're starting to fall back down again. I had to make a second correction burn to make sure that I was lined up correctly, because when I did the first burn, I started too close to the maneuver node. What I should have done is looked at the maneuver and split it in half, with half of my maneuver before and half after. But I didn't stop to think that with nuclear engines it was going to take so long. Normally getting 3 minutes within your maneuver node distance and starting there is going to be fine, but in this case I had something like a 9-minute maneuver, so I ended up having only 3 on one side and 6 on the other, and that threw me off, and that's why a corrective burn was necessary. However, when I originally designed this craft, I put in it probably about 50% more delta V than I knew that I was going to need or thought I was going to need. Remember I said I did some math to calculate what its velocity was going to need to be for escape and capture, and it was somewhere around like 2100 or 2200 delta V. So I just threw 3000 delta V in here and figured, there, now I have a lot of room. Okay, so I'm going to use my crew transfer mod to switch Valentina from that little escape capsule that's really only good for one thing, and that's during takeoff. It wouldn't be able to re-enter. Once she's switched over, we'll take advantage of squeezing out all that fuel from that stage we're going to decouple, bring it up into the station, and once that propulsion stage is decoupled, we can finally put the module that was provided to me down here on the bottom of my section of the station. Sandwiched in between those two parts that I launched, we have the big ring hub promenade kind of area, and then we have the extender arm with the claw on it that's going to jam itself down into the asteroid. Because I know other YouTubers are going to try to extend this station and make it bigger and bigger, I had to keep my part count low, but I wanted a really cool looking station too. So the way I got around it was I used the part welding mod to stick many of those non-functional bits that are in the ring, that promenade area, all into a single part. And then the arm that it's extending down from the station is also a pretty decent sized weld as well. So there are 2 parts that are all welded here. And between them, that's going to keep our part count down pretty low. And now it is time for the claw. The claw is our master. The claw chooses who will stay and who will go. And right now the claw is choosing to slam itself into the asteroid, and kerblam, we have docking. We have asteroid capture. We have a very wiggly space station. This is sped up, I think something like times 20 to times 30, somewhere in that range. It took quite a long time in real time to rotate that up, but what I'm trying to do is get the station aligned straight up and down so that future YouTubers can come and dock with it in a nice orientation, and perhaps even go out and do EVAs where the Kerbals are also nicely aligned with the station. Well, now this is where I had originally planned on leaving it. I was going to start my outro music for the video here and say, ta-da-da, there you are. There's my station rocketing through space, ready for the next YouTuber, until I talked to the community manager about it, and he said, solar orbit? That sounds kind of hard. And I said, well, I guess I could try to bring it back to Kerbin, but it's going to take a lot of fuel. That's a heavy asteroid. But I'm always up for a challenge, so that's what we're going to do. This is not over yet, even though I thought it might have been. So once again, I resorted to some math. Now, see if you can follow me on this. I looked at the mass of the asteroid and space station, and that was about 1,586 tons. I then looked at the mass, wet and dry, of this particular launcher right here, just the part that we might dock up to the asteroid, and it went each one from about 96 tons down to 23 once all the fuel was gone. By using a spreadsheet where I could enter the number of these that I wanted to send, it would automatically calculate the total wet mass and total dry mass of that number of these things attached to the asteroid. Using that, and using the ISP of the nuclear engines on board, I was able to determine that I was probably going to need about 5 to be safe, of these craft launched and jammed into the asteroid so that I could slowly move it over time to re-intercept back at Kerbin. The location where we want to do that is on the far side away from Kerbin, where it'll be easier to maneuver the asteroid and get it re-intercepting back at Kerbin. Also, that's where I'm just going to end up intercepting anyway, because now I need to rendezvous with this thing. It's already flown by and I need to go catch it again. So here's the first of the 5 asteroid movers legitimately launched, but not all 5 of them will be. I decided that if I could legitimately launch one of these, I didn't want to spend forever getting all of them up there. So the next 4 were just placed into orbit. But after that, I did send them off to do their rendezvous. With just some fast forwarding to get myself over to the far side where the asteroid was, I was able to catch up with it and then start one by one jamming them into the asteroid, just like I did the station itself. I had originally had a couple plans. I figured if I place these all around the outside in different locations, different axes, then I could enable and disable various engine sets, allowing me to maneuver it wherever I wanted. Although when I finally got to the asteroid, I completely forgot that that was my plan, and I just ended up sticking them in wherever I happened to be when I got there. It ended up not mattering though, because one of them was oriented correctly for me to use it to do my retro burn or whatever maneuver it was that I was going to use to get myself back to Kerbin. And as far as slowing down once we get back there, I have no intention of needing them there. We're just going to use the atmosphere to slow ourselves down. By that point, I'll only need one of these things attached, the one that will give us the just ever so slight maneuver once we're back out at our apoapsis to raise that periapsis back out of the atmosphere and not burn up over time. I also should have set up some special action groups to turn the engines on and off, but I forgot to do that, so I had to do that by hand. Once we got back to Kerbin, we did not need most of those asteroid movers anymore, so those were detached and sent back on their way off, probably to return into a solar orbit after passing through the SOI here. And then I hit another one of my little issues. The station was wiggling enough that it was adjusting my orbit in and out, showing that the trajectories mod wasn't entirely sure where it was going to come down. So due to those inaccuracies, this part took a couple save, try it, reload, try it again. But on the third one, it came down where I needed it, stayed in the Kerbin system, didn't blow up, and that allowed me to then bring that asteroid mover back again because I had decoupled it there to make sure that it didn't burn up on its way through, so that the station would be the only thing on the back side of this giant heat shield of an asteroid. But that meant that I had to re-rendezvous with the asteroid on the other side. And then the asteroid mover shifted our periapsis back out of the atmosphere, and finally we went out and cleaned up some of the parts so that the next YouTuber doesn't need to see all this junk I've left behind. And after deleting some of that stuff, we are finally done. Until next time, I will see you later, Kerbinauts.